welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another Sims 4 speed build. So today I am continuing my Build New Crest Community Lots Edition project, and this week we are building the cafe. So I decided to build Cafe Nervosa from the TV show Frasier, which if you don't know, or maybe you're not quite as old as I am, Frasier was a sitcom on TV in the United States back in like the 90s to like the early 2000s, and one of the popular hangouts of the show was a local cafe called Cafe Nervosa. So basically the show takes place in Seattle, and Cafe Nervosa is sort of what I would imagine to be like the predecessor of Starbucks, back when Starbucks was like, you know, a little bit less corporate, a little bit more of like still a local Seattle coffee shop. So this is Cafe Nervosa. So I decided to try to replicate as much as I possibly could from what we see of the cafe on the show. So obviously it's not a perfect copycat of what we see on the show, because, well, for one thing, we don't actually see the whole cafe ever. I know what the general inside of it looks like where the cafe counter is to order your drinks and your pastries, and like the general seating area, and then there's kind of like an area off to the back where there's like bookshelves and a bathroom, but we don't really know like the specifics of what those areas look like because they're never really shown on this show, at least not in great detail, which I would know because I've watched Frasier quite a bit. So the way I did the bathrooms is probably not how it's actually done on the show, but without really knowing for sure, I just sort of guessed. But yeah, so I have watched a lot of Frasier. It's one of my, so I have like some shows that I just sort of cycle through and rewatch whenever I get bored or I just need something to watch, and you know, there's shows that are very familiar to me, so I can just sort of have them on in the background while I'm doing other things. So Frasier is one of them. The others would be like Gilmore Girls, Friends, Parks and Rec, obviously. I love Parks and Rec. The Office, and I think that's basically about it. There are some others that kind of make guest appearances, like Full House and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I have like my group of shows, and currently they're all on Netflix in the United States, which makes it very handy. So like, especially if I'm like editing, especially like a longer video, or you know, just, I don't know, just doing stuff on my computer that, or sometimes like if I'm playing an off-camera save file and it's not super chaotic or anything, I'll have something on like my iPad as well. So I'm sort of watching something while playing something. I don't know. I can't just do one thing. It's just too difficult. I have to do more than one thing at a time because that's just how my brain works. So, but they're all shows that are very familiar to me. And Frasier is an interesting one because, so if you're not really familiar with the show, Frasier is actually a spin-off of another US sitcom called Cheers. And Cheers was on more in the 80s. So, I mean, technically that was not before my time because I was born at the end of the 80s, but like, I don't really remember it. I've never watched it. My husband has watched it, not as a kid, but he's watched it like as an adult. But basically my knowledge of what happens on Cheers is all from the framework of Frasier, because he does have like some of his friends from Cheers come on the show sometimes. But yeah, so Frasier's kind of interesting because it's a spin-off, which usually spin-off shows don't do all that well. But Frasier, for some reason, I mean, it was on for like, I think 11 seasons, which anymore, I mean, that's a really long time, especially for like a half-hour sitcom to be on. So, you know, props to them. But it is sort of a funny thing to watch now because like, there are some things that are obviously like, they haven't held up as well. Like, you know, like just some of the, like the cultural things, or like there's some comments that are made about one of the characters who in Frasier's mind is rather promiscuous, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know that you would be able to get away with that kind of a comment on a TV show today, because there are definitely a few like cringeworthy kind of moments, but I don't know. I'm willing to overlook that because overall it really is a great show, and it's kind of fun because Frasier is not like, he's not really the hero of the show. He thinks that he is, but he's not. It's the other characters on the show that make it a lovable entertainment type of show. And actually, I never watched Cheers, obviously, but they introduced the character of his brother Niles to make Frasier appear more likable, I guess, if you could say that, because Frasier is like, he's a very like snobby, kind of uptight in some ways kind of guy. Like, he, you know, like, he enjoys being in a wine club and going to the opera and like doing all of these like very blue blood types of things, despite the fact that growing up he was not really raised that way at all. His dad was actually a police officer, and so, you know, growing up he and his brother really took after their mom, who was more of a fan of like the arts and the opera and things like that, but she was, you know, also willing to like get her hands dirty, you know. But Frasier and his brother Niles are not that way. But actually the character of Niles was created to basically make Frasier appear more likable and more of like a humane type of a character, instead of like, because on Cheers he was sort of like the straight-laced guy at the bar, kind of like, oh yeah, like here comes Mr. Smarty Pants, because like he and his brother, they're both psychologists, so they're both highly educated people. Also, side note, while I'm looking at it, so on the show, the character of Frasier's dad, Martin, was played by the actor John Mahoney, who passed away actually just a few months ago, which is why I'm rewatching it. I didn't want to rewatch it at the time because I thought it would make me sad, but so now I'm rewatching it again currently, which is why I was like, oh, I should do this. As I said before, his dad was a police officer, and the whole point of the show, well, not the whole point, but like the whole premise of the show is that Frasier's dad, Martin, has to move in with him when he moves back to Seattle because Martin has been shot in the hip in the line of duty, and so he's having like some mobility issues and having a hard time kind of getting around, and like he's fallen down in the shower a few times, and so like naturally Frasier and Niles are worried about their dad. So instead of like sending him to a home, they have him move in with Frasier, since Frasier has this beautiful apartment that like overlooks the oh my gosh, what is it called? The tower in Seattle. Again, the Space Needle. So in honor of John Mahoney, by the door, which is one of the spots where a lot of times Martin would sit when they would come to the cafe, I put up the little picture from Get to Work of the two cops kind of like side by side. So that's why that's there. That's not actually on the show. I just decided to do that as like a little nod. But yeah, so anyways, I recommend giving Frasier a shot if you have never seen it. It's an interesting show. I'll give you that. And obviously, like, some of the arts stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I learned that. Or like, you know, like, it's a good mix because, like, so Frasier and Niles are obviously, like, the snobby, like, hoity-toity kind of characters. But there's also, like, his dad and his producer, Roz, and Frasier's dad's home healthcare worker, Daphne, who's, like, this like quirky English lady, and she's so funny. But so there's a good mix of like snobby characters versus not snobby characters, which makes the show likable for pretty much everybody, because either like you're not really supposed to like Frasier. I mean, like, he's not a totally hateable character, don't get me wrong, but he's a little hard to identify with, I think. And this is coming from somebody who has a background in the arts. Like, I studied music in college. So, like, a lot of the jokes and things that Frasier and Niles will make with one another, I'm like, I don't even understand half of them. But that's kind of the point, is that then everybody else in the room is like, oh my god, you guys, like, what are you talking about? Nobody cares. Have a beer and shut up. So, yeah, it's a good show. I really do recommend giving it a watch if you've never seen it before. And I also recommend downloading Cafe Nervosa, because even if you don't watch the show, I think this is a really cute little cafe. It's very, like, I don't know, it really does remind me of something you would see almost more in New York, which is funny because the show takes place in Seattle. But like, I don't know, something about all of the like the brick inside and like it's a little bit darker and I don't know. But anyway, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, you can do so down below. I put out a new video every single day, Monday through Friday. And if you subscribe to my channel, I also recommend turning on post notifications so you get a notification every time I post a new video. And you can do that by hitting that little bell icon. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have liked this, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!